Here today for a public hearing and bill signing for Intro 209-A, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of a person's height or weight in opportunities of employment, housing, and access to public accommodations.
Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Just getting straight into it. Today, we're going to be talking about a bill that was recently signed in New York City that protects weight and height similar to how race and religion is protected when it comes to working and jobs and stuff like that. So basically saying that discriminating on someone because of their weight is similar to discriminating on someone because of their race or their religion. So that was recently signed, and there is a video that I think does a good job of kind of going over all that, as well as sharing some back and forth between two people that we're going to be going over. So let's just get into it. So this is the video we're going to be going over, and it's from News Nation. It says, "Should weight be a protected class like race or religion?" Dan Abrams live. So let's just get into it.
Well, there will likely soon be a new legally protected class in New York. Along with race, gender, religion, age, employers are now going to be banned from discriminating against people who are overweight, fat. It's part of a larger movement across the country, which proponents have dubbed size freedom legislation. But to me, this raises a question of whether weight is something so innate that we can't control it, the same way we can't choose our race or our age. And I want to be sensitive to people who may identify as fat, but to say that this is a civil rights issue, as the bill's supporters want to frame it, is that going a little too far?
So he does, I don't know anything about this guy. I have never watched this show before, but the way that he handles this interview and this conversation, I personally think he does a pretty good job. I think a lot of the points that he brings up, I would agree with, or at least they're very close to how I feel. And so I did feel like he did a pretty good job. I think it's very easy to hear this and just be like, that's ridiculous, that's preposterous, how could you do this? Which I understand is the knee-jerk reaction, and if you read the comment section, it's what a lot of people think. Again, I understand where people are coming from, but I think he does a pretty good job of hearing what the other person says, who is actually someone we've talked about on the channel before quite a few times, and sharing some genuine concerns, right? So.
Well, the legislation was just approved by the New York City Council, and it bans height and weight-based discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. Mayor Eric Adams is expected to sign the bill into law later this month. It does include exceptions for employers who need to consider height or weight as part of the worker's ability to do their job. The bill is being championed by fat activists who say that...
So that right there, right? So if we go back a little bit...
And the bill into law later this month. It does include exceptions for employers who need to consider height or weight as part of the worker's ability to do their job.
So I think that that's important, and I don't think that's the end-all be-all, because I do think that there are other issues that this could pose, which I'll get into at the end of the video. But I do think that's important, because a lot of people will be like, well, if you're overweight, you can't do X, Y, Z. Okay, there are certain jobs that clearly it's like, if your weight can make it so you just cannot do the job, whether if you're too big to fit into a certain thing that you need to fit into for this job or whatever it might be, right? I do think that's important. And then I don't know, it's just interesting because there are so many jobs. Like when I worked at the Van shoe store, I was probably too big to I just remember the ladders in the back had a weight limit that said 250, and I was far above that. But that's besides the point. But I'm pretty sure I remember signing you have to be able to lift 50 pounds. That was one of the things that they put into the when you're signing and deciding that you're gonna work there. That was one of the things. If you can't do this, you can't work here, right? Or when I worked at the Vans, or when I worked at Vaughn's in the meat department, we regularly had to lift stuff that was pretty heavy. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. There's nothing that you can do to make that a thing for yours. If you cannot lift 50 pounds, you cannot do that job. It's just not going to happen, right? And so that there are realities that your size or your lack of size or lack of strength or your lack of muscle, your lack of just being able to do certain things, it just makes that job not possible for you. But again, it seems like this is at least addressing that to an extent. But again, there's more to it than that, I think.
The bill is being championed by fat activists who say that prejudice against fat people is a real thing.
In most places in the United States, you can get fired for being fat and have no protection at all, which is crazy because this is a very fat country.
And we're going to hear from that activist in just a moment.
So there is again, I understand, like, whenever I talk about this stuff, because I was very fat for a long time, and I know what it felt like to be discriminated against or just feel like I was treated differently because of my weight, and that's not a good feeling. Like, it really, really isn't, right? And so I do understand wanting to not be discriminated against or treated differently because of your size and how terrible that feels, and feeling like people are not going to hire you, even if your size has nothing to do with the work that you're doing. If you're just sitting at a desk or whatever it might be, right? Even if, like, it has nothing to do with that, feeling like people are looking at you differently and treating you differently. But I just don't know, because it's like one of those things that you can make these laws and these rules, but it's not going to change how people feel and how they act. And so I don't know. Again, I don't have the answers here. So I just want to make that clear. I just want to bring this to you guys and hear what you think.
But this isn't just New York. D.C., San Francisco, Madison, Wisconsin, a handful of other cities and towns have done this already. And in fact, Michigan is the only state with a workplace discrimination law that covers a person's weight. It's actually been on the books for nearly 50 years. But again, my question about this is a little bit more nuanced, because while I certainly think that discrimination against anyone based on who they are or what they look like is wrong, it's categorically wrong. But I also think that there's a clear difference between things that we can control, skin color, disability, age, which fall under well-established legal protected classes, and whether weight is something that a lot of people can control. And if so, shouldn't that make a difference here?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much exactly how I feel.
You can't change your skin tone, but people change their weight all the time. I'm not saying that they should or they shouldn't, simply that in many cases they do. And I think that that's what makes this bill and the debate around it really interesting. So joining me to discuss is the woman you just saw, Victoria Abraham. She's a self-proclaimed fat activist at the forefront of New York's bill banning weight discrimination. Victoria, thanks so much for taking the time. You really think that this is the...
So if you kind of have seen her and you're like, I feel like I've seen her. So we've talked about her before. Maybe she doesn't go by this anymore, but she went by that fat feminist, I think, or fat fab feminist. And so we've talked about her before. It's interesting because I don't know if that would be the person that I'd want to send, because she is very, very extreme, in my opinion, in a lot of her beliefs and thoughts and what she puts out there. So I just feel like if your goal is to get people to understand this legislation, this bill, sending someone like this, I feel like is just going, and maybe this is wrong of me, but this is just honestly how I feel. It's going to make people that maybe are iffy about it be like, oh, absolutely not, right? And so, I don't know.
The same category as race or age or disability, religion?
Well, we see that there are rates of
So it's interesting because she doesn't really answer that question, right? That's the first thing that I kind of noticed when I watched this, right? If you listen to the question, it's not really answered, and I was like, that's interesting.
I really think that this is the same category as race or age or disability, religion?
Well, we see that there are rates of discrimination that occur similarly to people that are overweight, as well as to people who, with different races. Basically, we see that there are similar rates of discrimination. So if people of a different weight are being discriminated against, should they not have that same protection?
Well,
So it's like what she says is basically like, it's happening just as much, but it never answered the question of if it's the same like level, right? The same harshness. Like, is it as bad? Is it as like detrimental? Is it as much of a big deal, right? I don't have the answer for that, but it's just interesting that she doesn't outright say being discriminated against because of your size is just as bad as being discriminated against because of your religion or your sexual orientation or your skin color, right? Interesting.
Thing, right? Mm-hmm. The only difference is, and look, there are people who have hormones, there are people who have genetics, there are things that they can't change.
Yeah.
But many times with something like weight, it's a lifestyle, or you can make a choice. And if the people, look, when you have race or race or age or disability, these are things out of your control, and the law has to protect people from being treated unfairly when they have no control over their life.
Have you ever been fat?
That's the thing. What's that?
Have you ever been fat?
I have not.
Okay, so I have. So here we go. Duel on.
So how would you know what it's like to be a fat person and whether or not that's something you can change? As a fat person, as a person in community with fat people, I can tell you that weight is something that people have tried desperately to change. And the point of this bill is not.
So yeah, a lot of people have tried, but also a lot of people have succeeded, right? Yet a lot more people have tried than have succeeded. But I do think that there are so many ways that we can help people better lose weight, and there are so many ways that we could just like improve the way that we help those who are overweight that want to lose weight, instead of just being like basically like throwing in the towel and being like, well, this is something that we can't change. Like, that is crazy to me, that instead of like, let's figure out how we can help people, we just want to like throw in the towel and be like, yeah, you know what? All right, we can't do it. We can't do it. And so let's make it easier for us. Like, I just disagree with that. Like, obviously, as someone that has lost the weight and kept it off, like, I just disagree. I just disagree.
Whether or not people should or should not change their weight. There are fat people that exist in the United States right now. Should these people not have the same access and same protection to work if their weight has nothing to do with their job and it is not impeding them on their job? Why should their weight even be a factor? Because currently in the United States.
So I agree with that. Their weight shouldn't be a factor. If the weight has nothing to do with the job, then you should not be discriminated against because of your weight. Like, of course I believe that. But I just really struggle to see how this bill will help in that way. That's just my opinion, though.
States, people who are overweight or obese, people who are fat, are 37% more likely to experience discrimination than their thin counterparts.
What happens if I read you the exceptions, right?
Okay.
I think we have a full screen of it too. What happens if employers say it's necessary for this employee to be a certain weight? Do you have a problem with those exceptions, or maybe employers expanding
this bill specifically is targeting those where like your weight does not impact you. Like if you're working at a desk job, my weight does not impact my ability to do my job literally at all.
So I agree. I just wonder if people will start pushing it, right? Someone that is like, okay, well, my employer isn't offering me a seat that I feel comfortable sitting in. My employer isn't making it so I can work from home because I just feel that I'm too fat to go into work, and it's too much of a struggle for me to get from my home into my work. And you might be like, John, that's ridiculous. No one thinks like that. Dude, the amount of people that are getting to the size where it is hard for them to leave their house is becoming a reality, right? And so I'm just like, at what point does it end? Like, I feel like you can find anything and be like, oh, my weight is the reason that I can't do this. And then if the employer's like, well, then like we can't hire you, or we can no longer employ you. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you do that. I need to sue. I need to you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like, yeah, I understand where it's coming from, but I feel like in the future it could just turn into like just so much crap. But I don't know.
But people have this perception of overweight people and assume that because we're fat, we're lazy, we're unable to. They have a lot of negative stereotypes.
Right, and we have about 30 seconds. I want to ask you real quick the idea that this could open.
So I just want to read this out. So it says, this bill will also create an exemption for employers needing to consider height and weight in employment decisions only where required by federal, state, or local laws or regulations, where the Commission of Human Rights permits such considerations, because height or weight may prevent a person from performing essential requirements of a job and no alternative is available for this criteria is reasonably necessary for the normal operation of business, right? So basically it's saying, yeah, if your weight is, if you can't be super overweight and do the job because physically you just cannot do the job, then those employers won't get in trouble or whatever. I don't know. It's interesting because it's like, where is the line? Where do we decide, okay, this is where, okay, if you're too fat for this, I understand, versus, oh my God, I can't believe you discriminate on someone. Like, they should be able to do this job. I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And I feel like once you get to a certain size, everything becomes difficult. Literally everything. So it's like, what's the size requirement to be considered fat? Like, how do we, there's just so much that goes into it.
Open up a flood of lawsuits. Everybody's going to say that they were discriminated against because of their weight. And what is fat?
There's a lot of ways to determine it, but you can look at the BMI, you can look at other things.
Dude, the BMI is crazy to me that she brought that up, because like, this type of person, right? The fat activist type of person is like one of the most against BMI, and I am not a fan of it either. Okay, it's like it's just a tool in people's tool belts to understand their weight and stuff, but like it's just so funny. Like, well, your BMI is how we could do it, and like that's just funny. That's just funny to me.
But if you don't want to be, if you don't want lawsuits, don't discriminate. Simple.
I'm glad we had this discussion. I'm glad you came on. I think it was really interesting. I wish we had a little bit more time.
Sorry, yeah.
But Victoria Abraham, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So that's the entire video, and honestly, I think I've made it pretty clear. I don't know exactly how I feel. I feel like it is a very complicated thing. It's easy to say like this is ridiculous and stupid and dumb and blah blah blah, right? I get where someone's coming from there, but I do feel like there is some truth to what is being said here on both sides. I obviously tend to agree more with like the host of the show probably, but I do think that it's more than just LOL, this fat person is crazy and ridiculous and like this is so dumb. I do think there's more nuance to that. I don't know what the answer is. I personally am not sure if I'm a fan of the bill, but I would love to know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.